on tonight's very special May the 4th special. I just did that twice there. I don't care. We are reviewing the premiere of the new Lucasfilm animated show releasing directly to Disney Plus, that being Star Wars The Bad Batch, or simply The Bad Batch. Chris, you excited?
Man, the Force is strong on this stream tonight. I know our chat is a bunch of Force users. I just hope that their senses are heightened to the level ours are, because we're bringing our A game tonight. That's all I'm going to tell you guys.
Which is ironic considering the fact that this is the first, I think, like Star Wars animated Star Wars property. I'll preface with that by saying that where the main characters are not predominantly Force users. But our thoughts on it and more, stay tuned. Man, Luke's already starting with the puns. What's going on, people? It's a very special May the 4th special episode of the Talkin TV podcast. I'm Dom, the movie nerd. That's Chris, the TV nerd. And we're here to talk about some Star Wars, as is the tradition on May the 4th. Obviously, we had a tremendous panel last year where we got together with some of our favorite people that we had literally just met at the time in order to talk everything Star Wars. And now we're here to talk about the latest Disney Plus drop, or was it? So, Chris, we met the Bad Batch last year with the final season of the Clone Wars, right? And then obviously with the Disney whatever it was, executives meeting, whatever the hell it was called,
Investor Day.
Investor Day. That's the one. I knew you would remember it. An onslaught of content that they announced as far as both upcoming Star Wars and Marvel projects. Needless to say, I was a little worried as far as the whole, oh wow, they're already taking advantage of the Corona space and just inundating us with content and forcing out even more competitors from the marketplace. But we saw, obviously, that the first 4 episodes of the last season of the Clone Wars were clearly a backdoor pilot for this crew. And now we're here. The first episode is premiered. And, well, first, before we actually get into the episode itself, like, kind of, what were your thoughts going in, seeing that, like, you know, these guys that were introduced in the first 4 episodes of that final season of the Clone Wars, right? And, like, kind of now them getting their own show. And then especially now seeing what the subject matter of the show was going to be like. What were your thoughts like going into that?
Yeah, Dom, just to sort of touch back on where we were last year, we did have our sort of Bad Batch ourselves on the podcast. Just a lovable group of misfits. And we're flying solo tonight, but that's okay because we're still going at light speed after this topic. And I think we have a lot of great conversations.
The puns are still going.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of great topics to still hit. So stick with us, guys. We got a lot for you on the show. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I really, the reviews were very mixed last year, if you remember, around the Bad Batch. A lot of people said it was sort of the filler arc. People obviously wanted to see Ahsoka and how they were going to wrap up the relationship with Anakin. And a bunch of the Star Wars fans who never even thought they would get that season, I guess, kind of felt that maybe, are we really spending our time the best way right now? But the other thing I noticed in those mixed reviews was a lot of comments that were saying things like, but it was still fun. It's just not what we wanted from this season that we are finally getting after all of the turmoil to get it done. And, Star Wars being in such a weird place where it was last year. And so for me, it's like, I never really had that exact feeling about them because season 7 was when I started watching the Clone Wars. And so I was just introduced to this lovable group of misfits who are just badass, doing whatever it takes to get the mission done. They weren't like the other clones, and they weren't just like not like the other clones because, oh, well, this is their gimmick and this is their shtick. Like, they genuinely felt different for a purpose, for a reason, and it was really cool and really interesting. And so I thought it was just like kind of this pretty cool little subchapter of last season that, I mean, look, we got to some really good stuff. Those last 4 episodes are still some of my favorite Star Wars that, if not my favorite Star Wars we've gotten in the Disney era. But I will say, man, their arc was nothing to shy at. And so I was confused because I thought, interesting, giving these guys the highlight. I didn't expect that. It kind of just felt like the warm-up arc. But I'm for it. Like, it was surprisingly fun. And so my expectations were never here. They were never off screen, somewhere around here. And so I didn't go into it really with like, if it lets me down, I'm going to be crushed. But I will say I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, just the fact that we got like the Star Wars version of the A-Team, like I'm always down for. Like I love those types of stories. I love it when you get like this goes all the way back to like the movies like The Wild Bunch and The Great Escape, which are all movies that I love. It kind of in a weird way like The Promise of a Glorious Past. I love movies and TV shows where you get a squad together, right? It's one of the part of the reason why I love heist movies, right? When you get a squad together and they've all got their individual talent and they can only like work together if they gel together as a team. And even though all these characters are types that we've seen before, again, if there is one thing that you love, if you want to see a story that you love recycled, it's put it in Star Wars, specifically in animation. Because the minute that these guys were introduced, first of all, just to introduce and immediately show off Lucasfilm's spanking new animation that they had with the Disney money behind them that they never really had back when they were on Cartoon Network was already a tour de force, because that was just some of the greatest action that I'd seen just on TV and in movies in general, let alone animation. And especially with how they reintroduced Echo, which is a legacy character for me from the original run of the Clone Wars before Season 7, and how they kind of brought him back into the fold in a way that like really didn't feel forced. It's like, oh, what? That kind of completely undercuts his death from the previous series, you know? And instead they actually did it in a really cool and meaningful way. And I was probably one of the only people that, like, of all the shit that they announced at the Disney Investor Day, I think this was one of the very few products that didn't make me groan collectively, because I'm like, oh, I mean, as much fun as an Obi-Wan Kenobi spinoff sounded, and I know a lot of people have been hyping it up, I'm like, did we really need that? I'm like, do we need a Lando prequel show? Do we need a Cassian Andor show? Rangers of the New Republic, cool, and Book of Boba Fett, yeah, those sounded cool, but like, did we need spinoffs of The Mandalorian already? Can't we wait until that picks up some steam first, you know? Probably the only two products that I was actually actively looking forward to, if I can just, let you guys into my cynical heart and not just, keep up the facade as like, oh, why does Disney still making anything? Don't they already have all the money in the world? Were this spinoff and then the Old Republic show, the Acolyte or whatever it's gonna call. Actually, I don't remember if it's Old Republic or High Republic. I don't remember the differentiation. I'm not as big of a lore head as I probably should be, but
it's Old Republic.
Yeah, especially, and I will say that what turned up my interest too is the fact that this is doing the one thing, again, that the animated shows just continue to do, and really, I should say the Disney Plus shows, because The Mandalorian does get credit for this as well, which is tackling some eras of Star Wars that we haven't seen, right? Everyone knows, like, look, everyone has been championing for an Old Republic, but I'll be honest, too many people are championing for an Old Republic show in a way that I'm like, it kind of tunes down my anticipation, because what I've learned, unfortunately, in this space is that the more amped people are about something, as far as kind of like it having a widespread appeal, the higher the chances are of it being disappointing. I am proven wrong many, many times, but that usually is what it tends to be, unfortunately, And as far as what the Bad Batch was going to do, the Bad Batch was going to explore one of the three eras that I had always had a really, really high interest in Star Wars that had never really been seen on screen. The other of which that is being covered. So the three eras, just to let people in, are directly after Return of the Jedi, so technically in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, which The Mandalorian is obviously covering. Directly after a new, Revenge of the Sith, which is an era that we have not seen, because even though we got Rogue One and Rebels, those were both in only the last couple of years of the Empire leading up to the Galactic Civil War before A New Hope. So we've read those 15 years that we got in between Revenge of the Sith and the start of Rebels, technically untapped, right? Which now this show is going to hit. And then the last one, which still have yet to hit, and let's be honest, I don't think anyone is ever going to touch this, because I think this might be too far back, is the 10 years that happened between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Because there are still some very, very important things as far as, within the greater chronology of Star Wars that happened in those 10 years that we have still not seen on screen, that really only exist in video games and the greater lore. So those are the three eras of Star Wars that I've always had the most interest in. And like I said, we have now not one, but two properties that are tackling that. So as far as the Bad Batch kind of being like this backdoor pilot, as well as tackling this one era of Star Wars that I'd always had an interest in, I was excited. But again, after just in the vast ways that Disney has burned me in the past, I was riding that level of skepticism, right? But I can safely say that after watching this first episode, skepticism erased, because as we've been saying since day one, at the risk of spoiling our thoughts on it, in Filoni we trust. Because everything that this guy touches, even with the amount of skepticism that we've had around certain projects that he has been involved with, they go away over time. Because, man, to say the least, this was an awesome premiere.
No, this was a really solid premiere, man. I mean, it delivered on so many different fronts. The one thing I will say is I still stand by my statements from this time last year on the channel where I said, I think we can do better than sort of filling in the blanks between so much that George Lucas gave us, because I mean, there's just such a rich lore in Star Wars. There's thousands of planets that have only been mentioned in canon that the creators who, George Lucas everyone only has so many years on this planet. He would never have a chance to flesh out some of these worlds. And so for us to keep going back to the same places over and over again in the same time period, I think we can do better. But what I will at least say is let's not butcher it when we do it. And so that's why I love the Clone Wars Season 7, everything that I've seen that Filoni did in the Clone Wars prior to that, although I'm sort of talking more in Disney canonical terms right now. And of course, with The Mandalorian having its ups and downs, at least it's stronger than most of the films, barring Rogue One. So it's like, if we're going to stay in the safe space, is what I call it, because let's be honest, it's so much more risky to go out there to the Old Republic, the High Republic, to even venture to another system that we've never heard of, that the Empire or the Republic might not have even gotten to, where there still could be Force users. That's the most interesting untapped well to me, but no one seems to want to do it. So if we're at least going to stay close to home, play it safe, this is how I want it done, because if you're going to do that, there's no reason you should bar away from the legend himself's vision, that being George Lucas. I mean, if you're going to be in his sandbox, you got to play by his rules. That's just the way it goes, Like, you don't go to someone else's house and, just reach into the refrigerator unless you really know them like that. And I think Filoni has earned the right to go into George Lucas's refrigerator and grab a Coke and not have to feel, rude about asking for it. Whereas I think some people sort of think that they had more, liberties than I think they really did. And obviously the fandom has been very vocal about the, the most recent trilogy. And so I still think it's a soft creative choice. I think it's not a bold creative choice, but that's what I mean by soft. It's not bold, it's weak. But I at least can respect how true to the vision they are, and it really feels like, well, someone sat down and asked George Lucas, hey, what would happen if a group of rogue clones who didn't quite have that chip that went off during Order 66 to kill Jedi, if they didn't have that, how would they react? And let's see the smaller part of such a major event in this galaxy we know and love. So I can really appreciate it for that. But I do think storytelling and art is about taking risks. I'm still not really getting that from Disney. But what I will say, Dom, is, and this isn't negative at all, guys, like, I'm just being hard on Star Wars because aside from music, it is the only other thing that has given me creative juices to want to pursue the path I'm on now. So I have to hold it to this high of a standard, to be quite honest. So, needless to say,
no, I mean,
don't get me wrong. I love everything I got today, and I've loved so far majority of Mandalorian Season 2, and I respect where they're going with the sort of cinematic universe on the TV side of things. But I do think, man, where's the risk and the dare that made George Lucas so bold and so great? He literally went out on a limb to create Star Wars, this universe that could have flopped, man. And I just want that back. And Filoni's given me a little taste of it.
No, you're right. And as far as, like, keeping it in the safe space, like, I get that. I mean, I've already made my thoughts on kind of Star Wars and the inconsistencies of it clear. But again, and I hate to keep bringing this up, but remember, we're not in the era of risking creativity the way that Lucas was in the 70s when he could pitch Star Wars. We're in the age of mass corporatization where if somebody's not tied to Disney in any way, good luck getting any attention on it. And I hate to be that guy, but it's just the way that it is, unfortunately, right now. And I guess, like, kind of where my bias comes in is the fact that, like, we all know this personally, specifically, like, Filoni, obviously, and everything that he's done with Star Wars to me has kind of, like, been my introduction to Star Wars, because, again, I was very late to the game. Like, I watched the prequels as a kid, but and even as a kid, like, I enjoyed them and thought the visuals were flashy and fun, but, like, with the original, like, I never had that love and attachment to the original trilogy that, like, most diehard Star Wars fans. So, like, to me, this is, as I've made clear many times before, this is, like, my sect of Star Wars. This is the Star Wars that I fucks with, so...
Since it's May 4th, I think it'd be a fun little sort of side tangent to ask you, when did you sort of find, because I know you love the original trilogy now, right?
Oh,
so
absolutely.
When was that discovery for you?
But that's the thing, is that I respect the original trilogy as movies, right? But as far as, like, Star Wars, right, and that intense Star Wars love, and I've told this story before, so, like, this is nothing new as far as that goes. It comes from watching the Clone Wars as a kid with my brothers every Saturday morning when that came on, as kind of like the reintroduction, right? Because at the time, that was when the prequels had kind of come and gone, right? But we were all too little to, like, have seen them. Like, we had never seen a Star Wars movie in theaters up to that point. So, like, when the Clone Wars came on TV, that was kind of like our like really introduction of like, okay, this is our Star Wars. You know, everything that came before, right? That was our parents. That was like the kind of the people that were a couple years older than us. That was their Star Wars. This is our Star Wars, right? And
that's true.
Pretty much. And the other thing too is that it's really the only sect of Star Wars that has kind of remained not critic proof, I'll say, but like has been for the most part really critically lauded. Like there have been really no bad reviews about the Clone Wars TV shows, no bad reviews about Rebels, right? And everything that followed, everything. Resistance kind of came and went, so like there was really nothing as far as that goes. And the Mandalorian, right? Even though that kind of like had its criticisms, right? I was already like kind of like molded by the Filoni sans and everything, you know? And so I can safely say that like nothing that Filoni has made so far, even like his more mid-tier stuff, has really disappointed. So that's where my bias comes in, right? And you know me, like every single time I'll get something that even whispers about the Clone Wars, right? And specifically like that Clone Wars that I grew up with, I'm like, boom, let's go. And like for this to do what it does and like amplify that even more, I'm like, just keep feeding it. Feed it directly into my veins. Let's go.
No, totally. And I definitely knew that about you. That's sort of like our divide as, you know, just our age group. Like I saw Phantom Menace on Christmas in theaters. I was 5 years old. My uncle took me to go and see it. And I saw the other two in theaters as well. And I get that you were obviously way too young to go to a theater to see that movie. You were like 1 year old or something.
I was 2 years old. I was 2 years old when Phantom Menace came out in theaters.
No, exactly. So we do have a decent amount of people in the chat, so I want them to let us know, where did your Star Wars attachment go? Like, what is your generation Star Wars? Let us know while I pose this question to Dom, because before we get too far, because I loved your sentiment about the original trilogy, and I don't think I know this about you.
Right.
What age in your life did you sort of discover the magic of that original trilogy? Like, where were you in your film critiquing career?
It's really weird because I've said this before, right? When I was a little kid and I would go over to my grandparents' house, there were always 3 cassette tapes. Yes, that's right, because even though I'm still younger on the age range, I'm still old enough to remember cassette tapes, and there were 3 cassette tapes that my grandparents loved that I would watch over and over and over again when I would go to their house, right? These 3 movies were just as influential to me in my movie-loving career, just as influential as every Disney and Pixar movie that I watched at my parents' house. And that was the original black and white King Kong from the 30s, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and Star Wars The Phantom Menace, because for whatever reason, my grandparents loved Jar Jar Binks. Gun to my head, I would not be able to tell you why. Again, that's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'll never get it, you know? And it was those 3 movies that I watched specifically, right? But even then, right, again, the thing that had the most amount of impact on me as I went throughout it, because this was the moment that kept coming back to me, like, this was the moment to me that defined, okay, this is Star Wars, is that fucking lightsaber fight at the end, which is still one of the greatest things I've ever seen on screen. And throughout the years, as it would go on, I would, like, watch a Star Wars movie here and a Star Wars movie there, right? Because Attack of the Clones came out obviously in theaters 3 years later, and I remember getting a DVD box set of Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones, but like I would watch like pieces of the original Star Wars on TV, right? And then finally we got the DVD box set of the original 3 movies, and we watched them, but we watched them out of order. I watched A New Hope and then Return of the Jedi before I watched Empire Strikes Back, and then I watched Attack of the Clones somewhere in there, and Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones were always the movies that we were drawn to more as kids because they were flashier and more visual, and then we finally ended on Revenge of the Sith, and Revenge of the Sith, I'm like, again, like, just, I don't know, it's really weird, but, like, none of the Star Wars movies of the original 6, if you'll call them that, really had an impact on me the way that, like, you know, like the Disney and Pixar animated movies that I grew up watching, which is insane, considering the fact of, like, again, Pixar is a direct spinoff of Lucasfilm because it started as a graphic, as a thing in the graphics department, so, like, that's kind of, like, how my brain works as far as, like, why I don't necessarily have this, like, you know, almost, like, cult-like worship that comes to the original movies, and I kind of just look at them as movies, you know? And that's also why I feel like I don't have, again, I've recognized the prequels as being faulty as they are. I know what your thoughts are on them, but, like, why I never necessarily regarded the prequels as, like, being the worst things ever, you know, the way that, like, a lot of people did for a lot of years before the new movies came out and kind of did what they did, you know? And that's kind of why I've always had this take on, like, the Star Wars movies as, like, not regarding them as these end-all, be-all, like, things to worship. I'm like, yeah, they're just movies, you know? But that's really my thought on, like, most movies, you know? If I'm being completely honest, there are very, very few actual movies that, like, have that, like, I'm talking live-action-wise, right? That really have that impact on me the way that, like, and I don't even feel that way about the Marvel movies. I think really the only movie franchises, per se, that are live-action that really have that effect on me are the Harry Potter movies, the Lord of the Rings movies, and the Chris Nolan Batman movies. I think really that's it as far as that goes, you know?
Crazy. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, the effect that those movies had on you. I mean, Lord of the Rings had a similar effect on me,
Right.
but not as to the extent that Star Wars did.
Right.
I think what I
Is that
do love about Bad Batch, sort of getting back to the series we're speaking about, and by the way, Luke, I think it's so cool that you got called Luke Skywalker a lot in
yeah,
school.
right?
I hope that
And
didn't upset you in
I
any
feel
way.
like
If
it's
it did,
only
I'm sorry,
fitting.
but
I feel like it's only fitting given
yeah.
the role that he played in the Strength of the Screenplay episode that we did,
No, exactly. It's almost like it was meant to be, man. That's
right?
cool. I hope you embrace that, and I hope it wasn't terrible for you, because I know sometimes kids can say cool things in a mean way. But anyways, man, for me, it's like Bad Batch and the Clone Wars. They at least remind me of why I love Star Wars as much as I do. Like, I have my fandom back not because of The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, I'd say, kept it back. And what do I mean by that? Like, I'm the kind of guy who has like multiple Star Wars YouTubers that I'll follow because I want to know when all the news drops. I play all the games, if they're good or bad. I've read many comics. I really love it. It's like one of my things that's not music that really consumes a lot of my free time, and I willingly and actively choose to give it up to. So when I saw this butcherization of it, this destruction, I'll call it, over the course of 3 films and a spinoff, it really, really, really kind of didn't just upset me from like a ticket buyer and a consumer, feeling like I wasted my money, but it really upset me as like a fan and someone who, it's like, even if I don't claim Star Wars to be a reason I'm a creator, if anyone was ever to write like a biography on me, they'd be like, well, clearly Star Wars impacted him enough where I have to say, even if he never stated, like, this is something that meant a lot to him. And you could make the assessment that, like, yeah, this is a big reason why he creates art, but it is a reason why, so you don't even have to speculate. And so, like, just to have that ripped out of you, man, the feeling of defeat around something which is built on hope, which is just so sad to see that happen. Because the one thing I will say about George Lucas, right, it's like he has these simple concepts, but then he adds such elegance and so many layers to them. So something that sounds as corny as like it is a franchise built on hope, well, he backs it up and it's incredible. And I think a lot of people try and, think, oh, Star Wars, anyone can write Star Wars. I think that's what Disney thought, right? It's
Yeah.
minimalistic. It's just
Nah.
the hero's journey. No, you need a certain level of nuance and elegance, and it takes a very masterful filmmaker to knock that out. And even J.J. Abrams, a guy who's like been around the block, couldn't get it done for a lot of people's accounts, definitely in my opinion. And so when you have shows like Bad Batch and Clone Wars being like these animated shows that it almost seems like are the afterthoughts to the overall Disney plan, be the thing that restores my feeling of why I love Star Wars, that gets me, looking up when the next video game's coming out, going back, watching the old movies, reading the comics that I used to love. Something's wrong, because it's not an animated franchise. It's a live action first, and at least we have the Bad Batch to sort of be like, I'd say, a kick in the ass to those creators to like do better,
I mean, at
because
least we
there's
hope.
no reason this show has no right to be as good as it is, but it is because the creator Filoni understands what he's doing. He understands Star Wars. So it's like, I'm not trying to bring a negative energy to this, but I just get frustrated when it's like, why are we paying so many big bucks to Pedro Pascal and, all these big actors to play these roles that don't quite hit the mark? Where these animated guys, so I don't even know the faces of the people voicing these characters, are crushing it. What's your take on all that, man?
Well, I mean, first, I mean, we know Dave Filoni is the heir apparent, right? I mean, even though he didn't have like as big a part as we think, he was still a very big part of that first season for Avatar: The Last Airbender, the single greatest animated show ever made. And I mean, look, as far as I go, in addition to that, there's another piece kind of to this whole, why I gravitate more so towards the animated Star Wars and the live action ones, right? Which is that I'm a sucker for animation, right? I am inherently biased towards animation and animated storytelling. And I'll be the first person to say that, right? Again, I grew up on Disney and Pixar, right? And I've just recently gotten into it and understood the majesty of Studio Ghibli. So I'll never pretend like I'm not biased towards animation. I'm 100% biased towards animation because 9 times out of 10, animated storytelling is 1,000 times better than live action storytelling. And that's not a dig towards Disney or anything like that necessarily. It's just a matter of like, I don't know what it is. It provides for so much more fluidity and flexibility as far as what the story allows you to do. That's just from the animated perspective versus the live action perspective. Now, as far as the whole Star Wars thing, I mean, at one point, yeah, I was in your camp as far as why is it that these animated storytellers can take all of these excellent storytellers, make it look do it incredibly well, make it look so easy, and just make these fucking live action filmmakers look like laughing stocks, right? I was in that camp for a while. And after a while, I'm like, but wait a minute. I remembered exactly. I'm like, wait a minute. Regardless of how good they're going to make it, I personally am always going to gravitate towards the animation first and foremost, because that's my bread and butter since day one, right? So that's necessarily why I go with animation, right? Because that's always what I'm going to gravitate to, because that's what I remember the fondest, right? Because like I said, that's my Star Wars, that's my bread and butter, right? As far as this goes. And I mean, as far as just, I've always regarded animation as kind of the underdog as far as the way that it's critically received, right? And even though to me, animated storytelling is always kicking live action storytelling's ass, right? Just look at a friggin' Disney Pixar movie told a more, profound, deep, and more fulfilling story than every other movie that we saw last year, few and far between as they were last year. So, I don't know. I guess in that sense, I'm always kind of like, kind of rooting for the underdog, because even though they're all Disney, right? At the very least, like, the animated movies always kind of are the underdogs, right? But when they're telling stories that are more entertaining, more fulfilling than the live action, I'm always kind of like, yeah, you show it to those, like, big dog live action people who can't even who wouldn't even know, like, how to make a movie if it slapped them across their face, right? We're always kind of making fun of that. It's just like, not just with Star Wars, but with action storytelling and all the different stuff we've been covering on the podcast, that it just seems like something was lost in these past 10 years that Marvel came to dominate, right? So I guess in that sense, it's just refreshing to know the kind of the thing that I've been behind since day one is still managing to tell these incredible stories as far as that goes, right? And now just as far as this premiere, right? In an hour and 17 minutes to me, they told a more fulfilling and complete story than 3 live-action movies and however many 17,000 Marvel properties we got in the last 10 years, right? So, like, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I wish I could have given you more of an answer to that, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm satisfied and I'm happy.
Fair enough. Well, I'm going to turn to the chat for a few seconds. We have some friendly faces leaving some pretty good comments that I want to give some light to. So Luke says he was thinking about this the other day as to why he can't overly bash MCU stuff, Wanda, Falcon, etc., but he can absolutely trash The Rise of Skywalker, and I guess it's down to that Star Wars, and I guess that's down to that Star Wars means, here we go, way more to me than the MCU does. Yeah. Does as in the more I care about it, yeah, for sure. The more critical I'll be. I don't really know what to make of that. It was just an interesting thought. Hey, man, I think I'm in the same boat as you, man.
Oh yeah. You're always going to be less critical of the stuff that you're biased towards. That's just a matter of life, right? That's nothing new. We know that, right? There's a reason why.
No, that's not what we're saying at all. I mean, I feel like I'm overly critical of Star Wars because of how much I love it. I feel like I'm super harsh on the fact that, like, I can't even give Force Awakens any props because it really is just sort of like a terrible foundation that sets a horrible precedent. And I've been open about that. So I think what Luke and I are saying is, like, the reason we're harder on Star Wars than the MCU is because we love it more. Yeah, that's and of course, Matt.
I completely went over my head there.
It's all good. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I was about
for
to
the
say,
listeners at home.
Thank you for that, because otherwise I would have been like, wait, what?
And I feel like I think everyone has that trait in them. It's like the things we love, I think we want the best for.
You know what? So, yeah, I gotta say that because I'm the same way with Pixar. Every time Pixar puts out a shitty movie, I'm like, fuck.
Look at you with Onward, man. You know, I mean, you were terribly harsh on that movie.
Yeah,
and I don't have that Pixar gene, so I wasn't.
Sucks because that's not a Pixar movie. It's a Disney movie disguised as a Pixar movie.
Yeah, exactly. See,
that's to call itself Pixar. Yeah,
point
I know.
In case.
Who am I kidding?
And we got Matt hanging out. Of course, Matt and Luke, we're both going to have to get you guys back on the show sooner than later. We miss you guys. We hope you're doing well. Matt says they're keeping the same quality from season 7. Yeah, of course they are. And I totally agree with that. And yes, I think the show does have great potential. It's good to be critical on things you love so they can improve. Yeah, I think that's what I love about our little corner of YouTube that we all have here in this community. I feel like for the most part, none of us pull punches. And I think sometimes it gets a little intense, right? Where some other content creators are having more jovial discussions about their art. But like, hey, man, we want the best for the things we love. And I don't think that's a problem. But I wanted to sort of talk about the way that they have filled in the blanks of what I always wondered about this section of the world would be like. I
haven't come up with a name for it yet, Luke, but thank you for looking out.
Damn, yeah, that's actually, we'll have to get to that.
I got a lot of good suggestions, but like I'll figure it out.
We're going to do a live stream when Dom comes up with the name. No, I'm just kidding,
I miss these live Q&As. I want one soon.
Well, we'll have to do one soon. Anyways, so I think, I've thought about this a lot. Like, what is it like post Order 66?
Yeah.
What's happening when Obi-Wan's falling down into the pit?
Does this mean that like we can actually like talk about like the plot of the thing that we said that we're actually having this special for?
Sure, I think our Star Wars Day conversation's out of the way, and I think like let's really dive into this Bad Batch show.
We got a half hour left. Let's talk about like what actually happened in this premiere, which is, I mean, First
Well,
off,
hold on. I was saying something. I was going to say, I think that my sort of daydream was fulfilled with this episode. I've always wondered what it was going to look like and how it was going to be. And I think that's the one thing I will say, right? Like, we are in a sort of safe zone, but Filoni's mastery and understanding of what I believe George Lucas would have done is exactly what I got in this episode. So it's like, you can't be mad at it. You can, it's like hate the game, not the player type thing. And Filoni, man, you can't hate him. Even if he like gets traded to another team and eventually starts like, making your team lose because you're playing against him now, it's like, you still got to respect the talent because the dude is talented. And this was everything I thought it would be and more. It was incredible seeing Kanan as his former name and sort of getting that, like, because I didn't watch Rebels, but I've read the 25 issue comic run. Like, Kanan is a badass character, man. And it's just so awesome how each moment has a value and each moment feels so purposeful. And even the character of Omega, who I admit I was iffy on at first, like the way that in this one episode they're able to hook you on her, it's like, she's a part of the team now. Like, that's it. I'm not going to be skeptical about her at all anymore. It's like, I can't wait to see the Bad Batch and what happens with them next. And when I say that, I'm including Omega because she's a part of that to me now.
Yeah, dude. Freaking, I mean, from the opening scene, where this just showed that, like, god damn it, I'm like, just when I thought I was out, just when I thought that the Clone Wars finale had pulled out my heart, Mola Ram style, or Kali Ma style, and ripped it apart ripped it to shreds right in front of me with that Clone Wars finale, and with how they executed Order 66, just when I thought, I'm like, oh, there's no way they're gonna top it. They top it by showing the one scene that was always talked about that set such the precedent for Rebels, with showing Kanan's origin, right? Because I watched all 4 seasons of Rebels, didn't love it as much as I did Clone Wars, but man, I'm like, that just proved, I'm like, yeah, Filoni and animation in Star Wars, I'm like, go all out. Like, that is, like, to me, that is apex Star Wars, Literally, I made a sarcastic post on Facebook this morning after I watched it and said, this is apex Star Wars. What's called? Someone convinced me otherwise, and someone dared to comment. It's like, oh, the original trilogy called, and I attempted to be like, yeah, the original trilogy can suck my, well, you know what comes after that. But, yeah, the only thing that I'll say is that, yeah, just opening with that and showing Kanan, right, and showing the Order 66, I'm like, I wasn't sure if they were gonna do it immediately or if they were gonna, like, build to it after a little bit, but having it happen immediately, right, and having the I don't know if this is a retcon, right, because again, I didn't read the 25-issue comics, so I don't know if the Bad Batch were actually there. Most likely it is a retcon if I had to guess, but like, having the Bad Batch right there, and I can already kind of figure out, it's like, okay, if they're deformed clones, then definitely they're not going to have the working chips the way the rest of the clones do. So just seeing that reaction immediately was already incredible. And then just as far as, like, that being the chain event and kickoff as far as to what would lead to the rest of them, and seeing, like, all the different, like, members of the Bad Batch reacted, I'm like, okay, already sold. I'm like, just from that, I'm like, I'm already in, as far as this goes. And then you have, like, the smoldering backdrop, and yeah, I'm with you as far as the Omega character. Every time they introduce a precocious kid character in any one of these big properties now, I'm like, okay, really? We're doing this again? But yeah, I agree. Like, just as far as, like, how they used her within the story and kind of the role that she plays on the squad, and as far as, like, how I can already tell they're trying to train her up to be Crosshair's replacement as far as that goes, like, it hit all the beats that it needed to. And I'm like, when that episode ended, I'm like, all right, let's go. I'm in.
So I'm glad you kind of ended with Omega there, because Matt thinks she felt kind of forced. And I agree, Matt, and I love the pun. I think it's hilarious. But I will say this. She clearly was hey, this is still a kid show, even though we're obviously talking about some pretty adult themes. And we know now that our audience isn't just kids, because it's been 7 seasons of this mega hit Clone Wars TV show. So we know all these things, but we still have to kind of fit. Like, it's like with sitcoms, like, they can only venture so far out of the mold. We have to fit a mold here. So she's kind of like what I call the plush doll character, like the R2-D2 to the original trilogy, or like the BB-8 to, like, the trilogy I don't really want to ever speak of again. But I do think it's Filoni's tact and his prowess as a creator to introduce her and give her meaning at the end, make her save the day, justifies her inclusion in the show. So even if you didn't like her, she at least served a purpose and made it so that the next episode happens, first of all, because God knows what was going to happen to Butcher if she didn't intervene. But also, it's like she adds value. So it's interesting, it's not just like she's pulling a lighter out and giving you the thumbs up from the inside of her tiny Balkan chamber thing. She's actually, like, got some skills, and like you said, she could be the replacement. And the one thing I will say, man, it's so awesome how these characters were so realized, where it's like their dynamic is, we only knew them for 4 episodes, right? We only knew them for 4 episodes of season 7, yet this conflict that's happening between Hunter and Crosshair is so compelling because they're so fleshed out, they're so thought out. So the fact that, like, ooh, one of them kind of was a little less messed up than the rest, and he's conflicted and he kind of can't see the morality that the rest of his companions are experiencing. It's interesting stuff we're asking here.
Interesting division. It's
really
compelling storytelling is what it is. It's good storytelling. It's interesting, fleshed out character. And I have to give credit to also, again, mostly to Dave Filoni with just how much he loves the clone troopers and how much characterization he's able to give, and to the voice actor, Dee Bradley Baker, who voices every single one of those goddamn clone troopers that we saw through all 7 seasons of the Clone Wars and in Rebels and here, right? And we know that Captain Rex is going to come back, another beloved fan favorite, which I'm already psyched for. He voices all like 200, God only knows how many of them. And the fact that he's able to infuse each and every single one of them with a different vocal intonation and a different personality, like, just props to him. And this is why I will... No offense to live action actors, but why I will always give credit where credit is due to voice actors for just how they're able to imbue so much character into these hand-drawn characters, right? Again, just another reason why I hold animated storytelling in such a high regard, too.
Yeah, and you know what's awesome about this show? You can tell when an animated show is more than just an animated show when the voice actors kind of become celebrities. Like, dude, Sam Witwer kind of became like a minor Star Wars celebrity because of his performance, and that just speaks to Filoni just having such a handle. So let's dive a little further into the episode, shall we? Because while that intro sequence was amazing, and I think it was kind of everyone's daydream fulfilled for like, ooh, what's happening in Order 66 and other places?
Yes.
There was so much more meat on the bone to this thing, man.
Oh yeah.
Like that
when
whole.
They got back to Kamino.
I was gonna say.
Like, oh yes, we're finally seeing it. We're like, we've heard about this here. We always wondered, right? We always wondered, why would the Empire seemingly trade up this unstoppable killing force that are actually efficient for these fucking laughingstock stormtroopers that literally their aim is so bad and that they've been joked about like every possible chance, literally to the point where even Disney is getting in on the joke on how much stormtroopers suck. And we're finally starting to see the transition and what leads to that, right? We're bringing back, obviously, we're doing the Disney Star Wars thing of bringing back these legacy characters, but we're continuing to use them in meaningful ways, right? I'm sorry to cut you off, but like, again, this is my Star Wars, right? This is the Star Wars that I fucks with, right? As I keep saying. So like,
you're right, man. They cut costs.
Like,
the Empire cut costs, and in the end, it might have cost them everything.
To say the least.
Because clearly the clones are more efficient than the stormtroopers that we know.
1,000%.
And so I thought the whole use of the Kaminos and sort of how they were, because it was so brilliant what they did with Tarkin. It might have been my favorite Tarkin performance that I've seen since the original movies, man, because he was just so... What you would think would happen when all of a sudden shift is changed and someone goes from a friendly business associate to a tyrant or a dictator, and he's like, well, you had a contract with the Republic. You do not have a contract with the Empire, and our standards have changed. And guess what? We are going to be a little more ruthless in our business dealings, and if you don't want to give us what we need to meet our standards, well, then we're going to walk. And essentially, we might walk all over you at some point in time. And I love how the Prime Minister kind of Kamino kind of has this whole, because they're what is it, Kaminoans?
The Kaminoans.
Yeah, Kaminoans.
Yes.
However you say that, they're already kind of like a laid back, more neutral. They don't really give as much emotion type of species, but we actually kind of saw some real depth from them in this episode, where there was that one Kaminoan who was the right hand to the Prime Minister, who I wasn't sure if the Prime Minister was in on it, that he let kind of Omega go and like kind of like helped her escape and like kind of gave the bad intel at the end to keep her safe. But it's like, it's gotten that bad that quickly. We were able to see just the escalation, how gripping the Empire is with like the Kaminoans, who are like the most neutral, docile race ever, are like even in on like the, hey, are we sure we want to help it? Like, it was just so many, just the subtext was rich.
And the other
was
thing,
just...
too, that does is it adds even further context, again, going back, right, to the other season of Clone Wars, to the other seasons of Clone Wars, because, well, first off, with the Kaminoans, oh my god, now I'm doing with the Kaminoans, and then, obviously, with Echo, right? So, the Kaminoans, right, actually operated on and kind of took a part in the opening arc of season 6, which actually saw Echo's squad mate from the original run of Clone Wars 5, who tragically died after he discovered the whole chips plot in the first place that alluded to the chips, right? And then ultimately, again, was rendered docile by Palpatine, so as a means in order to make him look insane, in order to like lessen the plot, right? And Palpatine communicated right with a Kaminoan that made it seem like, oh, the Kaminoans were in league with Palpatine the whole time, right? They were with him. But now, this shows a different side of that and showed, oh, no, maybe they weren't as in on it as they thought. Maybe they really did. They were producing these chips in order to make the clones more, more docile and more willing to follow orders, right? And maybe they weren't as in on it, right? Which actually might explain as far as why the Empire eventually took over Kamino. Not to mention the fact that it also adds on Echo, and as far as how that connects with Tarkin, right? This is really going deep, right? Because as I said before, this is the Star Wars that I fucks with, which is that Echo not only was 5 squad mate from back in the day, right? Echo famously died, right, while rescuing Tarkin, who was serving under Jedi Master Evan Peel during that Citadel rescue at the time, right, which gives Echo further incentive in order to hate Tarkin, as well as the fact that it connects to Echo's death is part of what led Fives to act his way, not only during the siege on Umbara, right, when they turned on Jedi Master Pong Krell, who was revealed to be in league with Dooku, but also what led him to investigate the chips when a chip malfunction caused his fellow squad member Tup to go insane and kill a Jedi Master before he was supposed to. So, like, seeing all those seeds, right, trickle down, right, like, that's the stuff that, like, my ADD brain just goes nuts as far as just seeing, like, all those different chains being able to, like, wrap up and get together and like kind of pay off in all these interesting ways, right? And we haven't even gotten to Saw Gerrera yet as far as that goes.
Right. No, it's masterful, and I totally agree with all that. So, when I saw Saw, man, it was very interesting because it further played into the Bad Batch have to define themselves in this episode, and who are they going to be? Because for once, it's not just light side, dark side in this galaxy far, far away. Like, there are moral grounds and moral lines that are being drawn, and they haven't been fully defined yet. And every action you take is going to determine what side of those lines you fall on, whether you like it or not, whether you knew it or not when you made those choices. And so we're really asking some very like metatextual questions here of these characters. And so I think Hunter and his ability to sort of have the mental prowess as a leader to be so revered and so calm in these situations and take it slow is more important than ever in this story, because I mean, had he fired on Saw, we might have lost so much rich canon, I mean, I'm trying to think about it where these are just as important as the live action movies, and they're all connected because we know that's what Disney wants it to be. So, I mean, I want to think the reason why he didn't fire on him isn't just because of the, reasons why he can't die, but because these questions that Filoni are asking are so compelling that something's calling upon his humanity, right? Even though he's a clone, they've proven that they are a very human bunch of clones, and they have this, like, look at in the beginning with Kanan letting him survive, And so to me, it's like we're asking these questions that I don't even think Rey had to deal with in the beginning, and that's why I keep.
Are you kidding me? Rey figured out how to fly the Millennium Falcon in 5 seconds. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
she's literally the most privileged Star Wars main character I think we've had to deal with yet. As far as like kind
I wouldn't
of the
use that word, but I would say the plot is it parts the sea for her and lets her walk through very easily, because these guys, man, they're really begging some dark and tall questions in this series only in the first episode. Yes. And it's not even like I had to think too hard to get to those conclusions, though. It's just so interwoven in an elegant way that it's just right there, but it's not distracting.
Like, that's what I mean. Like, we've talked about this a lot at the time. Everyone thinks that these stories have to be so complex. No, they don't, right? The stories themselves can be simple. That's part of the charm of The Mandalorian, is at the end of the day, right? Again, we criticize it a lot in Season 1, but I feel like Season 2 much more so found its groove and its voice as far as the stories. At the end of the day, as lore-filled as they are, they're very, very simplistic. He goes on a quest in order to find another piece of information, right? And it's kind of the same thing here, right? They go on a mission, it goes wrong, they go back to home base, find out a little bit more, right? Get tested, go on another mission, fully discover, right, exactly what's going on, and then go on the run, right? It's as simplistic as that, right? And as far as Saw goes, right, I did just also want to give credit, and again, this is how good, and again, and how much they pay attention to continuity in a way that the movies never really did, right, is that So obviously, right, for Rebels, right, when Saw Gerrera, because Saw Gerrera, again, for the first time was seen in the Clone Wars, right, season 5 of the Clone Wars, right, but Saw Gerrera obviously famously made his live-action appearance, portrayed, I'm not gonna say fittingly, but very memorably, I'll say, by Forrest Whitaker, right, who then would reprise the role of the character in Rebels. But freaking Clone Wars is so good with its consistency, and most likely probably because they just didn't have Forrest Whitaker just didn't have time to go back to voice actor, but they paid attention to consistency, and they got the voice actor from Clone Wars, Andrew Kishino, to come back and voice Saw for this one, right? So just that alone gets them props as far as continuity's sake. But again, like, Saw, I'll definitely say, in kind of the limited time that we've seen him, and kind of his micro arc that he's had throughout the verse has definitely gotten, I'll say, a bad rap, right? Obviously, because Saw obviously is willing to go in directions that the rest of the rebellion later on is not willing to, which kind of separates him out and makes him more of an extremist terrorist rather than a rebel leader, right? But just seeing Saw's origins, like, kind of the thing that motivates him, right? The fact that he is a freedom fighter, the fact that he really does care for his people first and foremost and is willing to do whatever it takes to protect them, right? Just seeing those humble origins, right? And just seeing kind of like the Bad Batch being these voyeurs into these familiar sects of Star Wars that we know, right? Laying the seeds for things that are going to come later, right? Some might call it manipulative, right? But for me, I'm like, yeah, it hits perfectly well. And I love that scene. That scene where, again, Saw is not going to fire on them as enemies because Saw is intelligent and Saw remembers, right? And Saw understands that the clones are nothing but pawns in this greater game that is happening between Palpatine and everyone else, right? And Saw understands and knows that they have to make a choice, right? Is that as torn as they may be, they have to figure out for themselves what side they are on, right? And again, it shows with Crosshairs, right, as far as Crosshairs. But here's the thing. I never trusted Crosshairs, even for the minute that he was introduced in the Bad Batch sect of Clone Wars, where I'm like, yeah, this guy, he's already just, the way that Dee Bradley Baker's playing him, he already sounds like more evil than the rest of them, right? Like, obviously, Wrecker's dumb, and Tech's kind of like, obviously, quite literally a tech head, and Hunter's like, obviously, like, kind of the fearless leader as far as that goes. But this Crosshairs guy, this guy definitely seemed a little bit slimier and definitely more so bad than the rest of these guys. So I guess that's why it comes as no surprise to me why of all the ones that was going to get, like, turned to the Empire side, it was him, right? Especially when he, like, started saying, like, soldiers follow orders. I'm like, oh, maybe he's not as defective as the rest of them, So, I mean, it definitely sets up for, like, a definitely interesting arc, but, like, just all of that, again, in itself, I'm like, this is what I get. These are the types of stories that I love, and this, to me, is the stuff that I feel like I have always gotten from this sect of Star Wars that I've really never gotten from any other sect of Star Wars. So, I mean...
No, I think those were all really great points. And to me, the last sort of point that I want to bring up that sort of really screams through what you were saying, at least what I got from it, is attention to detail. And how important it is to treat this galaxy with the respect that so many of the fans give it. Because let's use Saw Gerrera as an example, man. There is no reason that Filoni should have went as hard as he did with making sure that character was recreated the perfect way that he was from the season 5. And I did look up some clips just to get some frame of reference. And it's that attention to detail that I think we need in the live action verse, not just on Disney Plus. I'm talking about the movies, because let's be honest, Marvel, Star Wars, their bread and butter is always going to be the movies, the theatrical releases. That's where these franchises make the majority of their money. That's where their heart is originally in there. So, like, we need more of what we got on the small screen in the Star Wars universe on the big screen. And I think it's why Marvel, even though we have our critiques of it, it's hard to argue that it's not something that feels consistent throughout. We might not like the tone. We might think it's a bit formulaic, a bit easy, a bit safe, but the tone is there, and it's from the TV shows to the movies. It's consistent, and Star Wars needs to figure it out, because every time one of these animated shows drops, it sucks that this is the best we have of Star Wars, because this should be the icing on the cake, right? This shouldn't be the cake itself. And look, I'm glad we have this, because like I said, my fandom needed these shows, needed the Disney Plus era of Star Wars. For all I will say about Mandalorian Season 1, that was messy. Overall, I did enjoy myself. It's just also so sad to think, will the movies do this? I can't say they will anytime soon. And it's just upsetting as a fan. And I feel like on May 4th, I kind of wanted to pick your brain about that. Like, do you feel the same issues about the attention to detail like I do, or what?
I mean, how do I word this? I don't care is the answer. I don't care if
Okay.
I never. And I've said this. I've said this before. Cool. Patty Jenkins is directing a Star Wars movie. Cool. Taika Waititi is directing a Star Wars movie. But as far as I'm concerned, if I never see another Star Wars movie, I'll be perfectly happy. You know, the last 3 movies were what they were. It really does suck and unfortunate that at the height of Marvel's fame, Disney couldn't pull it off, right? But whatever, I've made my peace with it. We still got Rogue One out of it, right? And the way that I see it, we'll always have the original movies. And again, I've come around to the prequels. I rewatched Revenge of the Sith last year, even though Attack of the Clones still gives me a headache every single time I watch it just because that last act is nauseating visually. I still enjoy them, right? So as far as I'm concerned, if we never get another Star Wars movie, I could care less. And as far as I'm concerned, the animated Star Wars, right? That's my love of Star Wars. That's my Star Wars bread and butter. So if they keep churning this shit out and making it look easy with how good they are, I say, let them do it. As far as I'm concerned, I'll take 30 more of these before I take another bullshit Star Wars movie that gets fucked up.
Fair enough. Seems like we're different Star Wars fans, which makes for a good conversation, I would say.
Yeah. I mean that's been no secret since day one, so.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, did you have any final points, things you wanted to add to our Bad Batch discussion?
Loved this episode. Can't wait to see where it goes next. And look, 16 episodes or 15 episodes left, rather. Give me 24. I don't care. Give me this is the one show that I would take the original kind of like network thinking 24, 25 episodes for, because I know they would crush it. And also, just before I wanted to go, we've been talking a lot about Filoni, but I also wanted to give props to the executive producers, right? Jennifer Corbett and Brad Rau, who are also the co-creators of the show, who Filoni brought over directly from his Clone Wars team. So props to those guys as well, because they crushed it with this premiere.
Yeah, for sure. Props to everyone involved, honestly. This was a huge success for Star Wars. Just a huge success in general for an animated show to have this big of an impact and be this successful, man, asking these deep questions. I was impressed. I was blown away. And I can't wait, man. 15 episodes. That's going to be amazing.
It's going to be awesome.
It really is.
It's going to be fantastic. And the one thing I will say, though, where I will be in your camp, if I'll start to get worried, is if this show starts to lean too hard into the member bears. Because we know Ahsoka and Rex are coming back, and that's fine, right? That makes sense. And obviously, we know that Fennec Shan is going to make her animated appearance in this show from The Mandalorian, right? Again, Star Wars is no secret as far as like crossing characters over, right? And it's, obviously, again, just if. Again, seems to have happened largely in the Disney era of Star Wars, but still, the one thing I'll say is that if they start to lean into those member berries the way that Mandalorian Season 2 kind of did, I'm going to be like, oh, no. Again, this is tackling, even though we're still in that Star Wars safe space, we're in still that one unknown era of Star Wars, So, like, I want to see some cool stuff, Like, I want to see Vader show up and slice and dice some more people, Like, we got a taste of that in Rogue One, and now it's animation. So, as far as I'm concerned, all the toys are at their disposal,
Yeah, man, I really can't wait to see what these guys do with it. So shall we do star ratings?
Yes. Yes, 4.5 for me. It's still not perfect because barely anything's perfect, but yeah, unless it's Soul, but yeah, 4.5 for me.
I got to go 4.5 as well. I mean, what more can you say?
Yeah.
This, like I said, this gives me hope. Every time these animated shows have come out in the past year, I've just fallen back in love with one of the things I love the most, and I can't thank them enough for that.
Yes, absolutely. And as far as kind of ranking this compared to like the other 2 premieres, it's tricky because again, we didn't have the inherent bias because both the premieres kind of premiered before the Disney. Well, I mean, technically not really. Like Rebels premiered, like that was when Disney officially bought Lucasfilm, but it was kind of before we were kind of inundated with the IP, right? So Rebels kind of and Clone Wars were both kind of able to stand on their own. Clone Wars obviously had the leg up because they were about characters that you knew, as opposed to Rebels, which were at the time about primarily interesting character. But all that I want to say is that, look, I better not hear one person complain about this. Oh, it's too dependent on everything else. It's Star Wars. Everything in Star Wars is dependent on something else, right? So, like, I don't want to hear that. I just don't,
Yeah, I think to those people, I hear you, and I know what you mean. I think we need to start challenging the creators to venture into, the whole library of the Jedi. There's got to be so many stories in there to explore, right? We've heard about the library, now let's open up some of those books. So I hear you, but I think a lot of people just think we're in good hands here.
Yeah,
because that's how I feel, at least.
Or how about we do something? How about we go into Luke's like great grandson, Cade Skywalker, who's like a renegade Jedi / gangster who hates being a Force user. How about we do that? That was like the one comic strip that I did read back in the day. That shit was awesome. So like, let's see that as a property, animated exclusively, of course, because live action.
We'll see what they pluck from Legends. We'll see. They've been bringing some stuff in, like Thrawn's back.
They have. Yep.
We'll see.
Yep.
I think they realized their initial plan might not have been the strongest.
May not have been super smart. Yeah. Bob Iger saying, "Oh yeah, the original plan to go to Mortis. Yeah, we got away from that." I'm like, yeah. Look at how well that worked out for you.
Yeah, man. So, Dom, why don't you tell them where they can find our podcast and keep up to date with us?
Yeah, they can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Talkin TV Podcast. And if you click the subscribe button below, click the bell next to it, and click the like button on this video, you guys can get notified every time we put up new content. We've been doing our best to put up new content 5 days a week for you guys. Again, this week we've got our farewell to Kim's podcast that we put up yesterday. Oh, the road is starting. You know, we're pulling up to the starting line tomorrow with our debut, Fast and the Furious. First time watch of the first ever Fast and Furious movie, which we will be releasing on Wednesdays leading up to at the release of the aptly titled F9. That's going to be a ride in and of itself. And then, of course, this coming Friday, we've got something new, something special for you guys. We're introducing the Talkin TV Variety Hour, where we're kind of using that as our way to like kind of catch up on all the TV shows that we're not able to hit for the main podcast, where we'll be talking about Bad Batch Episode 2. That's right, 2. On Fridays. You guys are not going to want to miss that. Stay tuned. And of course, like I said, just if you guys want to see more content from us, as always, leave them in the comments section below. Chris, where can the good people find you?
Yeah, first off, shout out to Joey in the chat, man. Good to see you, brother. And you can find me anywhere that matters at Christian Evanko. Evanko spelled Evanko. I make music, which... Hey, man, I think it's awesome, and I'd love for you to check it out. Just hit the link in my bio. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you listen, let me know what you think. I also have another podcast called Talkin with Andrew and Chris, which is a show about life, music, and everything in between. We do interviews. We talk about some of our favorite albums and all that good stuff. Again, available through the link in the bio. I make it super easy for you guys, and I hope to see you there. And also... this Friday night, as we talk about Bad Batch Episode 2 right here on the channel. And guys, don't just follow me. Dom's got some pretty good social media posts, and I'd love for him to tell you about it right now.
I don't know about that. I mean, like, it's mostly just me trying to be as sarcastic as possible and maintain what vestiges of my humanity I'm left to maintain in this digital age that just, again, will just not allow us to be human beings and have bad days and all that. But you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews. Again, I just recently posted about my new car, and I just really wanted to give a quick shout out to Luke, because yes, Luke commented in the chat that he told him to name it after a Kim's Convenience character because it's a Kia Korean manufactured car. I thought that was pretty great as far as that goes. I still have yet to figure out what title my car is going to be, but I'm somewhere between I got recommended the Blue Beetle, the Blue Steel, and the Chrome car, I believe, was another suggestion. But
I don't like the Chrome car. That's weird.
The Chrome car I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I'll come
You
up with
gotta do something that means something to you, man.
Yeah, I know. You know what it is? The problem is that I always feel weird about classifying human traits onto non-living characters. You know, I'm like, the machines are this close, right, to just like reaching a robot hand out from the steering wheel and grabbing onto my throat and choking me out while I'm behind the wheel. So I'm still like kind of hesitating on that as far as that goes, but like, you know, not to let into like a little bit too much of my paranoia, but like that's kind of like what always holds me back.
I think if you said that to Optimus Prime, you'd kind of make him upset.
Yeah,
kind of hurt his feelings.
I know,
it doesn't have to be a negative. It doesn't always have to be a T-1000.
I know,
or 100 rather.
But I just always think of like the scene from that first Transformers movie where just like the Allspark ripples just turn random things into Transformers. It turns like a vending machine, a freaking again. It's just more of an example for Michael Bay to just shove product placement down our throats. But still, I always think of like the one scene where it's like the one steering wheel for like those just randomly placed hot girls that have no business being there. What's it called? That just like the steering wheel, it turns into like a munchermobile, like bites onto the one girl's face, and then like I don't know. I was 10 years old when I saw that, so like that always kind of gave me nightmares as far as future goes. So that's what I'm chalking that up to. Bro, I'm telling you, you are not ready for the amount of ridiculous shit that happens in them. But anyways, thank you guys for once again tuning into another very special episode. I'm Dom, that's Chris. We'll be back with more Star Wars content later on. 12 seasons in a short film. Watch more fucking movies, and may the 4th be with you.